Breaking, chaos has erupted at the heart of Britain's power. What began as a quiet order from the Prime Minister has exploded into open defiance from the future king himself. In an unprecedented act of resistance, Prince William has reportedly rejected a direct command from Keir Starmer's government, sparking what insiders are now calling a constitutional rebellion inside the royal family. Within minutes, social media went into meltdown. Parliament is in shock. The palace gates are surrounded by reporters. Something historic and deeply dangerous is unfolding. According to leaked correspondence from Downing Street, Starmer personally instructed Prince William to cancel an upcoming royal address that would have publicly opposed the government's controversial National Unity Directive. A sweeping policy designed to consolidate political messaging and restrict public statements from official institutions, including the monarchy. But William refused. Sources close to Kensington Palace claim the prince was calm but resolute, reportedly saying, I will not silence my voice for politics. That one sentence has now sent tremors through Whitehall, where senior ministers are holding emergency meetings to contain what they fear could be a direct challenge to parliamentary authority. For the first time in decades, the heir to the throne has drawn a line, and the consequences are already spiralling out of control. The Prime Minister's aides, blindsided by the Prince's defiance, allegedly demanded the palace issue a correction, calling William's actions inappropriate and undemocratic. But inside royal circles, the mood is entirely different. Advisors describe this not as defiance, but as duty. William's statement, they say, was a stand for independence, a warning that Britain's traditions are being eroded by a government obsessed with control. By evening, royal rebellion was trending across the country. Thousands flooded the streets outside Buckingham Palace, waving flags and chanting, "Protect the Crown." In Manchester and Glasgow, protesters gathered outside Labour Party offices demanding Starmer step down. The atmosphere is electric, unstable and unprecedented. The kind of crisis that tests the very soul of a nation. Political commentators are calling it the Windsor Revolt, comparing it to the abdication crisis of 1936, when another monarch's decision changed British history forever. But this time, it's not about scandal or love. It's about freedom, power and the future of Britain itself. Behind the scenes, the tension between the palace and Downing Street has been building for months. Insiders say the relationship between Starmer and the royal family began to fracture after a series of policy disagreements, particularly over the government's attempts to limit royal involvement in public welfare initiatives. The final breaking point came when Starmer's cabinet proposed a clause preventing royals from speaking publicly on social or moral matters without ministerial approval. William saw it as censorship, and now he's acted. Palace sources describe a chilling scene, a phone call between Starmer and the prince that ended abruptly after raised voices were heard on both ends. Moments later, royal aides informed the press office that the prince's speech, entitled "The Duty of Truth in Leadership," would go ahead as planned, directly defying the Prime Minister's order. When reporters asked Downing Street for comment, the response was curt. The Prime Minister expects all institutions to respect the constitutional boundaries of our democracy, but the irony wasn't lost on the public, because to millions watching across Britain, it was not William who crossed the line, it was Starmer. Commentators argue that the Prime Minister has overreached, treating the monarchy like another department of his administration, and in doing so, he's awakened something no government should ever provoke: royal defiance. Journalists camped outside Kensington Palace reported that senior royal aides were arriving for an emergency meeting. Unmarked vehicles were seen entering through the private gates, and palace lights stayed on late into the night. Inside, advisors debated the fallout of William's decision, whether the monarchy should issue a statement or stay silent and let the public draw its own conclusions. But silence now seems impossible. Every newspaper headline screams the same word: rebellion. And as dawn broke over London, the divide deepened. Labour loyalists accused the royals of meddling in politics. Conservative MPs, usually cautious on monarchy matters, declared their support for William's moral courage. Even some within Starmer's own party are reportedly urging restraint, warning that attacking the future king could backfire catastrophically, because this is no longer a simple clash of personalities. It's a confrontation between two visions of Britain, one led by politics, the other by principle. And at the centre of it all stands a single, chilling question: who truly rules Britain, the elected or the eternal? The next few hours will decide everything. Reports suggest that Buckingham Palace may soon issue a rare public statement addressing the standoff. If they do, it could either calm the storm or unleash the greatest constitutional crisis in modern British history. But there's something deeper at play here, something that goes beyond politics and power. This isn't just about a speech or an order, it's about the soul of the nation. And as one royal insider chillingly told reporters, if they silence William today, who will they silence tomorrow? Within hours of the news breaking, the atmosphere across Westminster turned from disbelief to panic. What began as whispers in private corridors had now become a full-scale political eruption. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, visibly tense in his emergency cabinet meeting, reportedly slammed the table and declared, "No royal is above the law." But those words, meant to project authority, only poured fuel on the fire. For millions watching the chaos unfold, it sounded less like leadership and more like desperation. The image of a government at war with its own monarchy was spreading like wildfire across the world. Inside Downing Street, aides worked through the night drafting statements, holding frantic calls with constitutional lawyers and pressuring Buckingham Palace to clarify that the monarchy supports the government. But the palace refused. In a rare move, a senior royal source spoke to the press off the record saying, "The prince acted with integrity. The monarchy does not take orders from politicians." That single sentence, just 12 words, sent shockwaves through the establishment. Newspapers published it in bold across front pages. The Times called it the Crown's Quiet War. The Daily Mail screamed, "William defies Starmer. Royal dignity versus political control." As the nation woke to the headlines, the divide grew deeper. Labour officials tried to frame the situation as a misunderstanding. But insiders knew this was far more serious. The monarchy had effectively accused the Prime Minister of overstepping his constitutional boundaries. And Starmer, a man obsessed with control, couldn't let that stand. Within hours, government spokespeople began briefing select journalists that the royal family had violated the spirit of neutrality and might face a review of constitutional privileges. It was a veiled threat, but everyone understood what it meant. Starmer was preparing to strike back. Meanwhile, in Buckingham Palace, King Charles summoned his closest advisors. Witnesses say the mood was grave. The king, torn between his duty to remain neutral and his instinct to protect his son, reportedly said, "This family must stand for truth, not silence." The implication was clear: the monarchy would not bend. But behind closed doors, fear grew that Starmer's government might use legal or political force to strip the royals of their traditional freedoms, perhaps even their public funding, as punishment for defiance. Social media ignited with fury. Hashtags like #StandWithWilliam and #DefendTheCrown trended for 2 straight days. Crowds began gathering outside royal residences, waving banners that read, "We trust the prince, not the politicians." Across the country, pubs, trains and offices echoed with the same conversation. Had the Prime Minister gone too far? In Birmingham, a protester shouted into a camera, "This isn't about left or right anymore, so it's about power versus the people." That clip went viral overnight, capturing the raw emotion that now gripped the nation. But Starmer didn't retreat. Determined to reassert control, he called a press conference outside Number 10. Cameras flashed as he stepped up to the podium, his tone cold and measured. "No individual, no matter their title, is beyond accountability," he declared. "The monarchy serves the people through the government, not the other way around." The statement, meant to sound firm, instead landed like an insult. Political commentators instantly labelled it the speech that shattered the Crown's trust. Even some Labour MPs looked uneasy, realising that their leader had crossed a line that could not easily be uncrossed. Minutes later, a royal spokesperson appeared outside Kensington Palace and delivered a short, restrained statement, but its message was unmistakable. His Royal Highness believes that loyalty to the nation includes loyalty to truth and conscience. The Prince will continue his public engagements as planned. No apology, no compromise. The audience gasped. It was official. The prince had defied the prime minister and the palace stood behind him. Television networks interrupted regular programming. Analysts warned that Britain was entering uncharted constitutional territory. The BBC's senior political editor described it as the most direct confrontation between Crown and Parliament in modern history. The markets reacted immediately. The pound fell slightly. Foreign investors voiced concern. And yet ordinary Britons flooded social media with messages of support for the royals. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about identity, loyalty, and who truly spoke for Britain's soul. Behind the scenes, rumours swirled that senior military officers were quietly advising the palace to remain calm, fearing Starmer might use emergency powers to frame the situation as a national security issue. The Defence Secretary, when questioned, refused to comment. Yet within the military community, whispers grew. Soldiers, veterans and officers alike were said to privately sympathise with William. For them, the monarchy symbolised honour and tradition. If that was being challenged, what else could be next? As the day stretched into night, television screens across Britain flickered with images of Buckingham Palace glowing under floodlights. A symbol of defiance, dignity and danger. Outside, the crowd grew louder. Chants echoed through the night sky. So, for crown and country! A single flare of red light lit up above the palace gate, the kind of moment that will one day appear in history books. But in the corridors of power, Starmer's advisors were already plotting their next move. One unnamed official leaked that the Prime Minister was preparing to summon the King to Downing Street for an urgent constitutional discussion. If true, this would be the first time in decades that a sitting Prime Minister had effectively ordered a monarch to appear. It would be a showdown between duty and defiance, and nobody knew who would blink first. Britain was now a nation on edge. Parliament was divided. The palace was resolute. And the people, for the first time in generations, were taking sides. Some called for calm. Others whispered a darker word: crisis. Because behind the formality, the statements and the headlines, something deeper was breaking. Trust, respect. The invisible line that separates government power from royal honour had been crossed. And in that silent space between them, the fate of Britain's democracy now hung by a thread. The air over London was heavy with unease. The palace remained lit through the night, a symbol of sleepless defiance. Inside, King Charles prepared to make the most difficult decision of his reign, whether to confront the Prime Minister publicly or preserve the fragile illusion of unity. Advisors urged caution. But the situation had already spun far beyond control. The nation was divided, Parliament was paralysed, and for the first time in living memory, the monarchy itself was under political siege. Then came the leak that changed everything. A classified memo from the Cabinet Office surfaced online, and within minutes, the story detonated like a bomb. The document, dated just days before the confrontation, revealed that Starmer's government had drafted a secret proposal to redefine and modernise the constitutional role of the monarchy, including provisions to limit royal speeches, veto charitable initiatives, and place royal communications under ministerial supervision. It was, in essence, a blueprint to silence the crown. The revelation spread like wildfire. Newspapers called it the Monarchy File. Online forums exploded. Protesters outside Downing Street began chanting one word in unison: treason. The backlash was instant and uncontrollable. Across the country, thousands of citizens rallied in defence of the royal family. Even figures within the Labour Party began to break ranks, calling for transparency and accusing Starmer of going too far. Nigel Farage seized the moment, appearing on live television to declare this is the greatest assault on British tradition since Cromwell tried to abolish the crown. His words hit a national nerve. Suddenly, the debate wasn't just about politics. It was about identity, loyalty and survival. That afternoon, as Britain trembled between outrage and disbelief, King Charles made his move. Stepping before cameras in an unannounced broadcast from Buckingham Palace, his expression was grave, his voice steady. The monarchy has endured for centuries because it serves, not rules, he said. But service is not silence. When conscience demands it, one must speak. My son has acted with honour, and I will not see duty turned into disobedience. The country froze. It was not just a royal statement. It was a declaration of moral authority. For the first time, the king had taken a side. Within minutes, Downing Street went into meltdown. Reports emerged that Starmer had cancelled all scheduled meetings and was consulting legal experts on the constitutional implications of the king's remarks. Cabinet members argued behind closed doors, some warning that confronting the monarchy head-on would destroy the government, others urging Starmer to stand firm or lose all credibility. The pressure mounted like a ticking bomb. The Prime Minister was now cornered, not just politically, but morally. As dusk fell, the nation seemed to hold its breath. Crowds flooded Trafalgar Square, waving Union flags and chanting the King's words back at him. Service is not silence. The chant spread like a heartbeat through the capital, across cities and into homes. It was no longer just a slogan. It was a message to every politician who had forgotten the meaning of service. Television screens showed an extraordinary sight. Police officers standing shoulder to shoulder with citizens, guarding the gates of Buckingham Palace from any threat. Then, in a final act of political defiance, Starmer attempted one last broadcast, a late-night address to the nation. He stood in front of the black door of number 10, pale and visibly exhausted. "We must preserve the rule of law," he said, "and ensure that no individual, and no matter how noble, undermines democratic order." But before the broadcast even ended, commentators were already calling it hollow. The public's trust was gone. The country had chosen its side. Moments later, in an unprecedented display of unity, leaders from across the political spectrum, including Conservative and Independent MPs, signed a motion demanding a parliamentary inquiry into the abuse of executive power against the monarchy. The Prime Minister's authority was evaporating before the world's eyes. Journalists described it as the slow-motion collapse of Starmer's rule. His government, once untouchable, was now hanging by a thread. Meanwhile, inside Kensington Palace, Prince William sat beside his father, watching the coverage unfold. According to palace aides, the king turned to him and quietly said, "You did what was right. The rest will follow outside." The crowd roared louder, as if echoing those very words. For a moment, history stood still. 2 generations of monarchy, united not by ceremony, but by conviction. By midnight, sources inside Downing Street confirmed what many had suspected. Several ministers were preparing to resign. The government had lost control of the narrative, and the world was watching Britain stumble toward a new reckoning. Commentators on international networks compared it to the fall of a regime, not by revolution, but by revelation. And as the clock struck 12, the palace released one final statement, brief, measured, and devastating. In times of trial, the crown remains steadfast. It serves not power, but principle. That sentence echoed across every newspaper, every television broadcast, every home that still believed in something greater than politics. In 1 week, a simple act of defiance, a prince refusing an order, had torn open the hidden cracks in Britain's political foundation. It revealed arrogance at the top, courage in the heart, and a nation desperate to remember who it truly was. The rebellion had not ended. It had only just begun. Because when the crown speaks truth to power, the people listen. And when the people awaken, no government can silence them. The storm had passed, but the kingdom would never be the same again.